don't know. First trip to Kansas. Playoff debut. Top 10. Is it worth it? Is it worth it? Screw it. Play the song. Yes, today was the Xfinity Series Playoff opener at Kansas. 12 drivers enter this race hoping to win a NASCAR Xfinity Series championship, and one of those drivers is Shane Van Gisbergen. We did a whole playoff preview, whole playoff prediction, couple videos earlier in the week if you want to go look at those. But we looked at this race as a potential, I don't know about a struggle. I hate to say struggle, but as a potential mulligan. Lack of stage points. It's a new racetrack for Shane Van Gisbergen. Top 15 maybe, but no. Well, Shane Van Gisbergen didn't get the stage points. He got a top 10 on the day. An 8th place finish in his Kansas debut. Let's talk about Kansas Speedway for a second. Kansas Speedway, a 1.5 mile racetrack that is equivalent to 2.4 kilometers. This track has been in NASCAR for a little bit over 20 years. I think 23 to be exact. The turns have 17 to 20 degrees of banking, that progressive banking we've talked about in the past. And something unique about this track, or something that the fans love about this racetrack, is you can run all over the place. In the turns, you can run right at the bottom of the racetrack on the white line. You can run in the middle of the racetrack, or you can run on the top, on the wall, literally inches from the wall. In fact, we saw a lot of guys hit the wall today while running up there because you're trying to get everything you can out of the car and you just scrape the wall and you slows down, or in some instances, in fact, race winner Eric Almirola earlier in the race got into the wall too hard, cut a tire. So we see the wall become a factor. It's kind of like what we talked about earlier in the season with the Darlington stripe. We kind of see that at Kansas. Guys run so close to the wall, you're running 200 laps. If you're pushing, you're bound to hit it every once in a while. In fact, we saw SVG get some scrapes on the right side of his car. Kansas, known for its tornadoes, known for, of course, the Wizard of Oz. We're not in Kansas anymore. I guess that would fit the tornado theme. But this race was the playoff opener, as I have said multiple times by now. And Shane Van Gisbergen had his best qualifying performance of the year to date on a 1.5 mile racetrack. The tracks he's been to so far: Las Vegas, Texas, and Charlotte. Of course, Atlanta, I'm not really counting because that is a super speedway. But in terms of an intermediate racetrack, a real 1.5 mile, this was his best qualifying performance, and it was a 22nd place qualification. His previous best qualifying run at a 1.5 mile was the 29th he had at Charlotte back in May. But today it was honestly a little bit hopeful for SVG. Usually when he comes to a new racetrack, he qualifies anywhere from 25th to 35th. Runs there for the majority of the first stage. Makes a little bit of progress in stage 2 and runs in the early 20s. And then by stage 3 is when he's starting to make his moves. He's learned the racetrack. He's kind of got a handle of things. And that's when he gets into the top 20, the top 15. Well, today we saw a little bit more of that, but it was a little more of a roller coaster in a sense. As I said, SVG started a little bit higher up than he has, and as he does at new racetracks, dropped a couple positions at the beginning, fell back to 27th, but a quick caution came out. SVG wanted adjustments, and about every time pit road was open under caution, SVG came to the pits for adjustments. Just did not like the handling of the car. They made all types of adjustments: chassis adjustments, wedge adjustments, air pressure adjustments, any adjustment they could make that was within a reasonable time. They made those adjustments. Just the car was not handling well for the first 2/3 of this race, let's call it. And as I said, that first run fell back to 27th, came back, restarted about 33rd, 34th. Not a lot of guys pitted after lap 5. And he made his way back up through the field, made his way up to 24th by the end of the first stage. Restarted stage 2 about where he finished stage 1. It was 23rd, 24th, somewhere in there. And he was able to make his way into the top 20 for a bit, but then another caution came out. Once again, he ended up pitting for tires, or pitting at least for adjustments. and he ended up finishing that stage in the 20th position, made his way back up through the field. Then at the beginning of stage 3, there was a little bit of hope, I would say. Restarted in 16th place and ran there for the first few laps of the run before falling back once again early in stage 3, which was a little bit of a surprise to me. As I said earlier in this video, when SVG goes to a new racetrack, which this is for him, we see him kind of drop back on restarts early in the race, but by the end of the race, stage 3, he's holding his ground at the beginning, and then he starts to slowly make his way up through the field. But at the beginning of stage 3, he went backwards, fell to 22nd or 23rd, and had to start marching up the field again. And then with about 60 laps to go, the pit cycle began. You could only run about 50 to 55 laps on a fuel run, and you could maybe stretch it out to 60. So some guys were just taking a swing at things. If you pit early, you can get the undercut on someone. So why not pit early if you're not fighting for the win? If you're having a poor handling race car, if something feels wrong, why not? So we saw a lot of guys pit early, but we also saw a few guys, including SVG, run the cycle long, run the cycle till a caution maybe. And well, that's what happened. About all but 10 cars had pitted, and during a pit cycle at these racetracks in NASCAR, these ovals, you got to remember, they're running 30, 33, 34, even 35-second laps. So when you pit, you're going to go a lap down. Even if you're the leader of the race and other people stay out, you're going to go a lap down for a little bit. But if the run goes green, if the run goes normal, you'll eventually get your lap back because, one, you have fresher tires, and two, everyone else has to pit. Well, when there's a caution in the middle of a pit cycle, it completely screws everything up. It flips the race on its head, and that is exactly what happened. With about 55 laps to go, about just 5 or 6 laps after the pit cycle had begun, a caution fell. As I said, about 7, 8, 9, maybe even 10 guys still hadn't pitted. SVG was 4th out of those guys who had not pitted, and there were only 15 cars on the lead lap. I'll re-explain this again. We talked about it a little bit last week, but the lucky dog process is the first car who's 1 lap down, they get their lap back for free, regardless of where they are on the track, regardless of what lead lap cars are in front of them. But they still have to start at the tail end of the field. They don't get to go ahead of the lapped cars and restart 15th, 16th, whatever it was. They have to start all the way in 33rd, 34th, but they're still scored in 15th on the lead lap. Well, then the next part of this is, as I said, the majority of the field, including the leaders, had made their pit stops. Cole Custer, Chandler Smith, Eric Almirola, the eventual race winner, they had all already made their pit stops, and they were on the lead lap, so they just stayed on the racetrack, which pinned a lot of cars a lap down, because if you want to get the wave around, you have to be at the front of the field at the time of the wave around. So the pace car is out, the safety car is out, and if the leader pits and you're a lapped car and you stay on the track, then you get the wave around. But if there is a lead lap car in front of you, between you and the pace car, that means that you are pinned 1 lap down. So Shane Van Gisbergen and the remaining cars ended up coming to pit road because they, one, needed fuel, and then also just they would have been at a massive tire disadvantage. But Shane Van Gisbergen restarted 11th. And he was ahead of fellow playoff contenders. A lot of guys, while Shane Van Gisbergen, this was a huge gain for him. They gained, as I said, they were 17th at the beginning of this pit cycle. All of a sudden, they're restarting 11th. So it was a huge gain for him. But for other guys, for Parker Kligerman, Riley Herbst, a couple other guys, AJ Allmendinger, they were running inside the top 10 or just outside. All of a sudden, they're running 17th, 18th, 19th. So as I said, it flipped this race on its head for some of these playoff guys, and Shane Van Gisbergen was one of the ones who benefited. He ran in that 11th to 14th range for the first half of the run, I want to say, but then as the run went on, as the long run continued, SVG's long run car kicked in, kind of like what we saw at Darlington a few weeks ago. As he's learning the track, as he's managing his car, managing his tire, managing his equipment, he was able to make his way up through the field. He was able to make his way up to 13th, 12th, 11th. He's in the top 10 with about 20 to go. And then on the last lap, he was able to get Jesse Love for 1 extra spot, 1 extra point. He was able to finish 8th in this race. a very impressive debut at Kansas Speedway. Once again, Kansas Speedway, a difficult track that has become much loved by the drivers, has provided some great racing, a multi-grooved racetrack. We had a great fight for the win between Chandler Smith, Cole Custer, and Eric Almirola. Eric Almirola won the race, so a non-playoff driver, but the 20 team is in the Owners' Championship. That's a whole other complication of the playoff system that it would take me too long to explain, but it doesn't impact the Drivers' Championship other than no one clinched a spot into the next round today. So there are still 8 spots available. No drivers have clinched. 12 drivers to fight for those spots. Here are your playoff standings. We see Cole Custer at the top of the board, plus 41. Chandler Smith is plus 36. They got to be feeling pretty good about themselves. Austin Hill plus 26, heading to a track he's really good at. He's got to be feeling good about himself too. Sam Mayer plus 13, that's definitely not safe. Sheldon Creed plus 10, that's definitely not safe. And then Shane Van Gisbergen. Definitely not safe at plus 8, but I will say, I said it in my playoff preview. I said he was going to finish probably realistically 15th to 20th. Optimistic was 15th, 14th, and he exceeded that. He finished 8th. I did not expect him to score stage points today. He did not score stage points, but he gained about 6 or 7 more points than I thought he would by finishing in the top 10. And that plus 8, that can be erased in a single crash at Talladega. You get wrecked on lap 1. If you get wrecked in stage 1, all of a sudden you're below the cutoff line heading into the Roval. But the fact that he has 8 points on the cutoff line exiting this race, I think that's a little bit of a sigh of relief, because I anticipated them being a little bit closer if they were in by 1 or 2 points or below. And the fact that they're exiting this thing plus 8, that's got to be a little bit of a momentum booster, a little bit of a confidence builder. But at the same time, we go to Talladega next week, a track that is unpredictable. We don't know what's going to happen. But on the positive side, realistically, Shane Van Gisbergen could score stage points next week. He could run top 10, top 5 next week, maybe even get a win. Because Talladega, anyone can win. Anyone can run up front. And we saw SVG score stage points at the beginning of the season at Talladega. So scoring stage points next week is realistic. Scoring a competitive finish, and if he does that again, if he gets another top 10 and stage points on top of that, he will be sitting pretty heading into the Roval. So we'll do more of a bubble breakdown on the Monday after, and then we will also do more updates after Talladega. Obviously, we got 2 more races to go in this round of 12 for the Xfinity Series Playoffs, but Shane Van Gisbergen, a very successful debut. He entered this race plus 10, so technically he lost on the bubble, but he still is plus 8. And as I said, that's a good start to the playoffs. Going more down the line, Jesse Love plus 3 heading to the track he's the most recent winner at. Riley Herbst plus 1. Obviously, plus 1, that's 1 position. Justin Allgaier, the points leader heading into this race, crashes early, does not get any bonus points in this race. He's now 1 point below the cutoff line, heading to Talladega, a race that he crashed in the spring. So Justin Allgaier, all of a sudden, one of the championship favorites. My championship pick, by the way. Not feeling so good about that right now. He's in the minus. It's -1. That's easy to make up, but he's in the minus. They can't afford another crash. They can't afford another bad race. AJ Allmendinger -13. Definitely a disappointing day, but I will say heading to 2 tracks they're really good at. Parker Kligerman -15. That's going to be tough to make up, but you do have a super speedway. Kligerman will be a factor. Sammy Smith -23. Not quite must win, but if it's still like that next week, that'll be a must win situation. So Shane Van Gisbergen, top 10 in his playoff debut, plus 8 on the cutoff line. 2 races to go before eliminations are made. How will Shane Van Gisbergen do at Talladega? How will he do at the Roval? We'll talk about those races once they come to fruition, or once they finish up. So we got a couple more weeks until that cutoff happens. As for the NASCAR Cup Series, their round of 12 kicks off tomorrow, so I'm excited for that. Kansas, one of the best tracks in the Cup Series right now. Very excited for that race. But Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you guys in the next one. Tomorrow, Cup. Monday, we got the Monday after, and then everything else this week, I guess I'll keep you updated on.